All right. Welcome, everyone. We are coming at you live on site here at Stratford. We are in the library right now. Joining me is Jeff Dickinson, the farmer here at Stratford. My name is Olivia. I am here as a past intern, and then now we're working on this beginning farmer program to educate beginner farmers, people that have been farming, are interested in learning more, or people that have not yet farmed and are hoping to get into farming potentially here in the future. Jeff, can you tell me a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure, I got into this field as a gardener, and I really never thought of it as more than an avocation until I spent 4 years in the service and never saw the outdoors. And came out of the service realizing I needed to do my avocation. So I did a bachelor's and master's degree in horticulture. Really never thought about livestock, but every farm I worked at had livestock, and I've learned it by doing it,
Yeah.
basically. And my PhD is in entomology at Ohio State, and the reason I'm in entomology is because my interest is in farming systems, and the, the insect world and the soil ecology and the life that's in the soil is what drew me into entomology, and so it served me well. But I'm a doer. I like farming, so uh, that's been here at Stratford for 30 years. So
Wow.
I've had a nice long run here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, I am originally from Chillicothe. I grew up on a small farm there. We raised goats, chickens. We had a small gardening plot. We mainly focused on heirloom tomatoes that we take to the farmers market. And then my main focus was raising an apiary. So we had about 10 hives where I would produce honey. And then I even did some research with Ohio State during high school. So I've always, been interested in agriculture. I was an FFA, and now I'm studying agriculture in college. And so this, I think, is beginner farmer program is born out of, a mission of us to educate people and a passion for agriculture in general. Um, so if you are tuning in live, thank you. There is a link down below to donate to Stratford. And then there's also a link down below to check out our website and learn a little bit more. If you are watching later, thank you for watching. And next up, I'm going to show a slide that shows our schedule. So I'm going to show that for a little bit so you guys can see kind of the layout and topics that we're going to cover within the next couple of months every week here on Thursday at 4 o'clock. All right, Jeff, can you tell me a little bit more about like how you got interested in what we consider regenerative agriculture? So why did you choose to farm the way that you farm now?
Well, my grandfather gave me the ethic. He was a naturalist. He'd always take me out into the preserves around. Back then, it was northeastern Ohio, Canton, Massillon area,
Okay.
to Cleveland, down to Willoughby and Wilmot, and so my grandfather gave me the love for nature and gardening.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced me to my first hot pepper, and and I was sort of attracted to gardening at that point on. And I the ethic and my love for nature. I was a kid that worked and lived outdoors. In fact, my first business, my own organic lawn care system, and basically, it was a guy who didn't want to use chemicals, and I'd walk up to the front door of these places and say, I can mow your lawn, take care of your dandelions without spraying anything, So that's what got me going into that. But like I said, I came out of the service, and the ethic of sustainability has just been something that's inherent in me. Regenerative agriculture was a phrase that I didn't hear or learn of until the 80s. It was a Rodale concept back then. They've fallen away from that somewhat, but as a concept, I always liked the idea of regenerative because it's an action-oriented word. It's a very proactive word. It suggests that we have to do something in our relationship with the land that speaks to that relationship that benefits all people, all sides involved.
Absolutely.
So, in the community also, the social aspects. So, I basically have dedicated my whole life to the idea of sustainability. Back then it was organic, regenerative, then it was low income, sustainable ag, and then sustainable agriculture. It created a lot of trouble for those of us who are in the business because people saw that as an antagonistic sort of position to take in agriculture. So I'm actually happy that it's evolved back to regenerative because it's less divisive and more picturesque. So the rubber really hits the road when you apply these concepts
Right.
To the fields and the animals, and so it's a relationship that has to sort of sustain itself over time. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah.
So I can't remember, but I'm trying to save room for that and not get too winded.
Yeah.
You know.
I was going to ask you, what are some of the challenges you see in modern day agriculture, whether that be in production ag and then also in regenerative and organic agriculture systems?
Well, to me, the biggest challenge has always been in the issue of sustainability is try to develop and maintain sustainable systems within a non-sustainable society.
Sure.
It's consumers that drive what we want and how farmers farm.
Right.
Farmers are, I've never seen the farmers as the bad guy in this picture because they're just doing what they've been told, what tradition has taught them, what science has sort of indicated to them as what they should be doing. But the consumer is sort of who farmers are sort of bred to, appreciate and support. The problem with that is we've created a system that's very centralized, very consolidated, very sort of corporate driven.
Sure.
As we found out, is very volatile. The Soviet Union, when it was a communist nation, learned that centralization of agriculture was a very vulnerable position to maintain, the idea of collective farming. So one of the tenets of sustainability in regenerative agriculture is that we should be mimicking nature, which has a lot of resilience, a lot of redundancy. These are ecological terms. Ability to adapt to changes. Research in numerous times has proven to show that organic agriculture is more resilient in a climate change world, in a volatile market world. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the life and the resilience of the farm is related to the community.
Sure.
It's related to that soil. It's related to the resources that are the system itself. It's related to a potential for bartering of compost and mulch and nutrients and plants and seeds within a very small circle. So any sort of disturbance in that system is easy to replace because you're familiar with and connected to the resources that are around you.
Right.
So it's so the challenges I see is to sort of change the mindset of those who work the land and the mindset of those who depend on the land for their food and depend on the land for their income. So it seems like a big task from where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Where we're used to eating food that's from California and across the oceans.
Right.
So we have to change the way we eat. We have to change the way we value food. We're still paying for instance, which is the mainstay of American agriculture and
Right.
the American food system, um, as we were back in the 30s during the Great Depression. If you track it through in terms of how the economic systems have changed over time, we're still producing corn, and our farmers are getting very little in exchange for that effort. But what's happened in the meantime is the price of farming, the cost of farming continues to grow, and just not economically, but environmentally, to the point where we have to start to rethink how we recapture that relationship with the land, so we don't have to spend both sweat equity and hard-earned dollars to farm successfully.
Right.
So it's a scale issue.
Yeah.
I'll say that organic farms can be scale neutral. You can have large organic farms. It just changes the mindset.
Sure.
It's a distribution issue. It's a storage issue. It's a processing issue. So those are all pieces or tenets of regenerative agriculture that sort of need to be rethought. The beauty of being in a regenerative agriculture system is that once you establish that mindset, that the soil can feed my crops, a healthy soil, which needs to be a living soil, and the community will support what you produce, what they need.
Right.
So that relationship, again, is a two-way street.
Right.
Mimicking nature. I mean, we've had great visionaries like Wes Jackson, new roots for agriculture. He's got a new grain out that fits in a perennial polyculture system, mimicking the prairies, where we don't have to break ground to harvest our food.
Right.
Agroforestry is becoming more important again because, again, it's based in perennialism and the idea that we mimic nature again, and we don't harvest natural food enough to support what's possible out there.
Right.
So and there's a lot of innovations with farmers that like to break ground. I like to break ground. It's a very wonderful, gratifying thing to break ground, even though I would agree with Wes Jackson that ultimately we should be able to grow without breaking ground.
Absolutely, yeah.
And but it's so if you're going to break ground, like in today's weather, we just had 6 inches here a couple days ago. We got a lot of construction happening here, and we see soil erosion happening everywhere around farmlands that have been broken. Construction areas, new roads, and as a result, our streams and rivers are now brown as mud.
Right.
So we here at Stratford, one of the main things we use probably more than anything else, if you come here at Stratford, you'll see very little ground broken. We always have it covered in cover crops.
Right.
We're always thinking about feeding the soil. We have an 8-year crop rotation here. Half of that rotation is always in rest mode. But while it's resting, I'm utilizing the livestock to bring nutrients to that pasture and to that hay ground.
Right.
And to actually keep the surface of our heavy clay soils broken up a little bit, and to accept new seed as nature uses it, including me.
Right.
As I plant seed. So cover crops are very important in our seed system. Redundancy of water systems. We're always thinking about mulch. We are thinking about the health of our wells. We're thinking about the quality of our water. We're thinking about conserving the moisture that we do put on.
Right.
And then we're also trying to be innovative. You know, people say that organic agriculture can't feed the world.
Right.
But organic agriculture has been feeding the world since the beginning of time, because industrial agriculture is only 100 years old.
Absolutely.
So, so in that process, one of the other arguments against organic or regenerative agriculture is that it takes too much work. You can't weed 1,000 acres of corn by hand.
Right.
Well, my point is that we first of all need to change our mindset about what a weed is and how we manage that and how tolerant we become of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not so much the weeds, it's the whole system you put onto the surface of the soil of the farm with legumes and other sort of native and naturalized grasses mixed in with these crops that we're trying to produce food from.
Right.
So, in addition to conserving soil, we're producing nutrients that feed the crops, but also feed the soil ecology, the soil ecosystem.
Right.
Um, the demineralization of our soils through our farming practices, it's become a huge issue for us.
Yeah.
It's more so in climate change. And I feel like there's opportunities there to use these crops to start bringing parent rock materials, calcium in particular,
Right.
which is a major driver in living soils,
Mm-hmm.
back to the surface. But with these heavy rain events, I'm losing ground on the calcium. I used to not have to lime at all through an 8-year crop rotation.
Yeah.
But now I am losing that battle with just the rotation. I have to think about the types of crops and the kinds of crops I put in and how long I keep them in place.
Mm-hmm.
And how kind of depth and tillage and the timing of the tillage and the tools I use to till.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, again, moving towards a non-tillage type system.
Yeah.
So that becomes huge in this equation.
Absolutely.
So I feel like I'm chewing up too much of our time here.
No, you're
so
fine.
We should probably move forward.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. I agree. I definitely have, from where I started in agriculture, so like I said, I grew up on a small farm. And then I had some more formalized education in agriculture, whether that was in high school in my agricultural classes, and then again in college when I'm in, my horticulture and crop science classes, my animal science classes. We had a workshop in Athens, and I was really further exposed to what regenerative agriculture really was. Growing up that way, I, kind of understood it, but it was always something, I just did. And then I learned about it and I was like, oh, organic, isn't the right way, is kind of what we're taught, I feel like. But I could see that there was an issue with only production agriculture. It's very clear that there are, challenges for both. Do you feel like regenerative agriculture can coexist with production agriculture, or that it needs to change like completely? In that, you kind of touched on that, just changing that mindset. Do you feel like production farms are able to make that change towards a more regenerative system?
I think farmers are actually already making that change, and just like all great things, great wine take time. And I feel like they are making changes more and more every year. I see cover crops being planted in between. I'm seeing less and less bare soil. I'm seeing more minimal tillage practices happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think farmers are feeling the squeeze in the marketplace, so they are looking for alternatives and places to be marketing their products and thinking about, biodiversity is the main driver. We haven't really talked about that, but I like to talk about economic and enterprise diversity also. The beauty of this farm is we actually are generating income 12 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We run 3 greenhouses. We run a sugar bush in March. We run livestock year round. And we actually are in a position where we're not getting a lot of money. We're not waiting for the check at the end of the year, but we're getting some income throughout the year. The apiary is another wonderful enterprise because it utilizes the natural ecosystem. I agree that honeybees were introduced to our environment, but they become such a mainstay and so important in what food we as a species eat.
Right.
So if to me, honeybees are sort of like the canary in the coal mine. If they're having trouble, then so are the other pollinator insects in our community. So if we can't maintain an environment that maintains them,
Mm-hmm.
then we can't maintain an environment that maintains insects and the soil ecology and all the things that make a living soil, a living agriculture survive. So again, I think conventional farmers, and I don't even like using that word, to be
Right.
honest. I
Yeah.
think it's like sustainable. I think their back's up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But they're as innovative and as resourceful as the next person, if not more so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like every time they get a chance to read about a new idea around going grass-based agriculture, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing more and more farms sort of throwing away the plow, or to the extent where they don't need to plant corn and soybeans every year. They have learned that cattle and sheep and goats and hogs actually are very hungry for what nature had intended for them. And so I've seen farms that are running in the red trying to grow corn for dairy farms within 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Stop planting corn for their dairy cows. Nothing but make hay and grass and pasture. And within 3 years, they could take a farm that's in the red
Mm-hmm.
and put it in the black. You know, I say I can grow corn on an 8-year rotation without any nutrient inputs. We make a lot of compost here because we have over 100 animal units here, and it's within the barn, especially during the winter months.
Mm-hmm.
During the growing season, I got them out on pastures. But with the grass-based system, I can create the nutrients in an 8-year rotation that produces maybe only 100 bushel an acre corn. Now I know the standard in today's corn production is 200, 240,
Right.
even more, 260 bushel an acre corn.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening in the meantime? The price of corn, again, is suppressed because the market is glutted with corn. And granted, we use a lot of corn for a variety of reasons,
Right.
but it's, first of all, it's not the healthiest thing for us. But and there's actually other uses for it that can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine what would happen to the price of corn if every farmer reduced their inputs and actually only produced 100 bushel an acre.
Yeah.
I will put my bottom line against any farmer because my only input cost is my time and my seed.
Mm-hmm.
The rotation covers everything else in terms of weed management, nutrients, pest management, insect management. I don't have corn earworm. I don't have corn rootworm.
Yeah.
The rotation takes care of all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put my bottom line against any other farmer's bottom line who produces 3 times more corn than I do. Now, granted, I'm not large enough to take advantage of the subsidies
Mm-hmm.
to make it more profitable.
Right.
But again, if you just compare apples to apples, inputs to output,
Mm-hmm.
I would defend that to the nth degree.
Sure.
And farmers out there, we all know we work for free anyway, so labor's free,
Yeah.
right? For a farmer.
Yeah.
One of the first farmers I worked with in the early days, my first farming job out of college, he's like, farmers don't make any money. It's all about ROI, return on investment. So that was a mindset that was very valuable to me for the rest of my life because farming is a lifestyle and a choice that I like. And it's so the idea you can't do organic for the world because it's too much work. Well, it's also a lifestyle that gives more than it takes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that's really important to think about, just that, if we can all make little changes and live our lives where we're, giving back to ourselves. We think about like the sustainability model, how it's people, profit, and planet. I think regenerative agriculture is one of the only systems that is able to, connect them all, equally.
Connect the dots. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Where other systems are, falling short in some areas. So if, let's say someone's looking to get started in regenerative agriculture, they may recommend that they do if they are looking for a plot of land to buy to start farming. What is some of the first things that you'd recommend they look for?
Well, I mean, anybody wanting to get into farming wants to start with their own personal goals. Mm-hmm. If it's to generate a lot of money, then guess what? You got to spend a lot of money to make a lot of money. If it's to support a lifestyle and you're looking to just sort of make ends meet. Scale is everything in that sort of equation. To me, what is it? Wendell Berry said, "We should never own more land than we can walk across in a day." And he sort of takes that from the attitude that we can't really get to know the land by sitting up in our tractor and covering thousands of acres.
Right.
And even in Stratford, I farm about 65 acres. I used to think of it in 5-acre plots. Now I think about it in 1 to 2 acre plots, because within that 5 acres, there's so much change.
Yeah.
So, so scale goes to what equipment, lifestyle issues, your affordability, your ability to manage, whether it's you or you and a team, you and a tractor,
right.
You know. So those goals need to be clear up front for anyone who wants to get into farming. So the boom right now is in urban agriculture.
Yeah.
It's actually the fastest growing sector in agriculture, and small farms being the next small vignettes. And the reason we're seeing those numbers is because these small farms are actually becoming more successful on a per capita basis than new large operations. Large operations require a lot of risk and a lot of upfront capital. So, I mean, the question's a little. Land is obviously, and capital is the biggest issue facing anybody wanting to get into farming. So once you cross that hurdle and you've got your goals set right, then it becomes actually more fun and easier to start managing things like, you're going to buy your seed locally.
Right.
You're going to buy seed that's more regionalized and adapted to the weather and soils that seed was developed from. Are you going to use those cycles within your weather patterns? How familiar you become with your soil and thinking about what's suitable, what crops are suitable. The idea of economic diversity that supports also biodiversity are questions that I think should be asked and answered in relative well. If I just made $2,000 in March by making maple syrup, okay, well I can add that to $3,000 in June for making honey, and I can supplement that with a smaller amount of money. And I've got these apples and blackberries that are coming on later in the season,
right.
And I'll keep chickens going year round, and I can make I'll sell 6,000 eggs a day for every day of the year, so you start adding those little pieces together, and it's not just income, it's about a lifestyle that you're starting to develop.
Right.
Now, some farmers don't want to get into something that's that complex, so that's what it goes back to, is the need to set goals first. I was fortunate in my young years to be exposed to Alan Savory's holistic resource management concepts.
Yeah.
And that was a whole farm planning system. So it was all these ideas, these sort of grandiose ideas on how to design farms, comes down originally to the goals of the people making those decisions and making those actions to meet those goals.
Right.
It's just like a nonprofit. A nonprofit organization or a business is never any more or less than the people that make it up.
Right.
And that extends to the community. It's that relationship with the community, people and the land, resources. So,
absolutely.
So it's a big question you asked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where do you start?
Yeah.
And you start with, what are you up for? What are your goals?
Do you feel, you kind of talked about it just a little bit earlier too, with just the oversimplification of what agriculture is, and then what agriculture, like conventional agriculture, is today. How do you see people, do you feel like people need to be experts in everything to be, good farmers, or do you think it's possible to, just start, figuring things out?
I think it is possible to partition it down.
Yeah.
But as you start to partition things down, you're also partitioning lifestyle, and you're partitioning income, and you're partitioning resources. So the beauty of being more of a holistic and sort of thinking against a continuum of time throughout a whole growing season, and then taking that continuum to years and decades, and you start thinking in those terms, then you can start setting goals that sort of relate to the ability to build a more integrated, interactive, holistic system. Now, I can't honestly say at my ripe age that holism is the cat's meowing where it's at, because it's not for everybody.
Right.
I sometimes wish it was, and wish people did think about other things and how things interrelate and interconnect, because that's how nature works. But nature's already got it figured out. They sort of come at it intuitively and innately and don't have to think about it.
Sure.
They just do it. So sometimes I think if we could become more integrated or interactive like that, that we would become more intuitive than we are now, or we become as intuitive as we were at the beginning of our civilization. You know? We've lost our ability to interact because we lost our intuition. So it's, yeah, I think you can have it both ways, but again, if you don't bring it back to your goals and how you approach it, from a lifestyle or philosophical or ethical point of view, what are you physically up for, then you're going to sort of miss the boat.
Right.
As to why people get into farming.
Yeah.
I mean, most farmers like being farmers because we like being our own bosses.
Yeah.
It truly is. But we give that up in more corporate models, because then it's not our business, it's their business, and they're sort of our energy and our aspirations and our lifestyle choices.
Sure.
So again, if we could break it down into pieces that are more interactive with people, the land, the community, then you start getting closer to things that are more successful, because there's passion attached to that.
Sure. You mentioned kind of us being, losing our intuition. Do you feel that the types of foods that we have available to us lack certain nutrition that regenerative farming is able to provide to people? Or do you think there's always this argument that organic is healthier? Do you feel like that's a statement, or do you think that that's the
science or more as we move forward? The complexity of food and how it interacts in our gut is starting to support that more. The cows are still out, but I think it's qualitatively proven anyway. I can't tell you how many people have come through an organic farm and pull an apple off of a tree that's never been sprayed. And they just go, wow.
Right.
But perhaps more important than that is the qualitative differences that come from local and fresh. We get excited when we bring kids through here at Stratford. Reason I've been here for 30 years, I have a child who grew up on tomatoes they get at grocery stores that came from South America or California or whatever.
Sure.
And they're just sort of, tomato tastes like sort of mealy and bland, But when they come and pick a vine ripened tomato off of a plant and slice that open, and that first taste that they had of a fresh tomato is just like their eyes just get. So time and time again, I've seen that reaction. Spinach. Most kids don't even know what spinach looks like,
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite tricks to pick a leaf, or tell them to pick a leaf and say, try that, tell me what you think. Oh, that's really sweet. What is that? Spinach. And they go, bah.
Yeah.
And so it's that perception we've created because we have very little experience in local.
Yeah.
Fresh and local. I mean, that alone, in my mind, is an issue in organic. Because it's the transportation, the process, the loss of freshness over time.
Right.
The fruit actually begins to rot by the time we get it.
Yeah.
They say the average age of an egg that we buy at a grocery store is 6 months old.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
That's how deep the supply chain is.
Yeah.
10 months. Okay.
Or even us, they pick the fruit before it's ripe, and so we're losing the nutrients there because it's not able to fully reach its maturity.
Yeah, to ship tomatoes, you got to pick them green.
Exactly. Yeah.
Same with the bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be able to ship them, you got to pick them green.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. So we have quite a few good questions, I think, that we could jump into here. So our first couple questions, we have one from Rebecca and one from Alex that are talking about cover crops. And so they want to know what kind of cover crops are good to plant. Specifically, Alex asks, what kind of cover crops do you plant to build calcium content? And Rebecca's asking more about the process, and then also like when can you plant them and then not till? How do you get what you want in without tilling cover crops?
There's a variety of answers to all those questions.
Yes.
So, like everything.
Yeah.
Context is everything in regenerative agriculture.
Right.
You got to understand the context. All right. Well, for calcium, obviously we're talking about deep-rooted crops or crops that actually have a great ability to capture calcium themselves. But
okay.
For generally field crops, we're talking they all crops have some calcium. They're sort of mining the soils at all times.
Sure.
But to get the real slugs of calcium to the surface, we need the deep-rooted legumes, your alfalfas, your clovers. I've actually was surprised how much corn can pull up calcium to the surface.
Yeah.
It's generally seen as a very depletive type of crop.
Absolutely.
More depleting to the soil than, which is sort of
considered
counterintuitive. It's a nitrogen fixer itself.
Right.
But it's that nitrogen it's fixing is for the plant, not for the soil ecology or the soil food web.
Okay.
And it doesn't produce a lot of biomass, and it's not a very deep-rooted crop either.
Right.
So some bean crops actually are very deep-rooted.
Okay.
So, and there's a lot of choices out there, and a lot of exciting things that are actually coming up in new seeds and varieties. So I'm always fascinated when there's a new seed variety and reading about what it can do. So, but one of the goals I have for cover crops, in addition to sort of maintaining cover on the soil, is especially during the cold months, winter months, is be able to establish and have a cover crop actually persist through damaging winters.
Okay.
But one of my high preferences for cover crop selection is for biological mechanisms that all plants have to some extent. It's called allelopathy. Some crops have the ability to suppress undesirable quote-unquote weeds, which again I have issue with.
Yeah.
But it's true. Weeds can be very competitive to a lot of the crops that we like. So to me, spelt is a wonderful crop. Not only can I get a crop off of it, it's easy to plant and grow organically. It's planted in the fall like winter wheat. But it has very strong allelopathy. And when I harvest that crop in the summer, when I plant it, I put Timothy and clover with it in the fall. So when it becomes a crop, it also serves what they call a nurse crop. And it's nursing what I'm actually after the crop, which is the pasture or the hay, or both.
Yeah.
And Timothy and clover. And so when I harvest that spelt in July, it's all sitting there waiting for me. This lush cover crop that I can immediately go in and graze. Or hay. Yeah. So I look for those types of interactions where you have multiple crops, multiple seeds put down at the same time, and getting multiple uses out of it.
Sure.
You don't have to plow it down. Rodale, again, who originally came with Regenerative, they're like the premier organic organization. They developed a system that's being developed by a lot of people now where you go ahead and let a crop like rye, which has strong allelopathy also, come to maturity.
Okay.
And you go harvest the grain. Sometimes it's favorable to go ahead and let the grain develop and reseed the field that you're getting ready to plant into with another crop.
Sure.
And they have these rollers that just roll the crop down on the surface and crimps it, and then you take a no-till planter to plant a crop into that natural mulch, which is helping to sequester the carbon in the soil, in addition to creating more carbon on the surface there. So So that's a neat, sort of exciting phase we're into right now. It's been around for at least 10, 15 years, and it's getting more refined as we move forward.
Sure.
So lots of opportunities and options out there.
Sure.
I probably shouldn't give such long answers.
No, I think that's fine. I think that's fine. One of the next questions that kind of goes off of this is like if it's your first year on a regenerative farm, what would you recommend like to be planted that first year in general?
Well, I mean, what you plant has to be associated
Right,
with.
right.
If you're going into a piece of ground you don't have a lot of history with, that's the first year responses you get is in flipping sod. Much more than flipping weeds or flipping a bare ground. Bare ground typically means it's had years of abuse and a lot of herbicide, petrochemical additions to it. So if I'm looking, if the question is what vegetables I can grow in that first year, there are things that are more tolerant than others and low nutrition, sort of half-dead soil. Kale is bomb-proof. You gotta love kale.
Yeah, right.
Tomatoes, that's a high nutrient consumer.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be my first choice, but there are again options. If you're going that has low fertility, instead of feeding the soil, feed the plant. And there's a lot of organic and natural nutrients you can apply to the base of the plant or as a foliar to the plant to make it successful despite the soil being in poor condition.
Right.
So there are generally a large bag of tricks that you can draw upon to sort of get around an understanding of the context as to why my crop's not doing very well.
Okay.
And so again, 1,000 contexts, 1,000 answers.
Right. Yeah. I know I've heard, like let's say I buy a plot of land, but I know that I won't necessarily be farming it. Like I'm still doing other things.
Right.
I've heard that one of the best things that you can plant right away are to plant trees. So what kind of trees would you recommend if you had a plot of land, depending obviously on the context? What would you recommend someone plant?
Well, keep in mind that trees are a permanent thing,
right?
Ideally.
Sure.
So if you wanted to get into tree farming, agroforestry is actually in cultural context is a very popular thing. So if you're looking to grow trees that have 50 value in 50 years, you can't go wrong still with your walnuts and your oaks and your hickories. And if you're looking to harvest product from it,
right,
then that's a whole nother ball game. I tend to look at things like hazelnuts, and then you have the potential, if you say you wanted to raise small livestock, plant them in a design or system that would allow you to graze in between the But then that's another decision point. Do I want a plantation in my backyard, or do I want a forest?
Right.
So then if you want a forest, then if you're going to mimic nature, you're going to put, you're going to have a little bit of everything. And the beauty of concepts like permaculture is they remind natural systems are three-dimensional, and that we need to actually think about growing up vertically, up and down, and horizontally, left, right, all around. So back to that old goals. What are your goals? So if you want to farm it in 10 years, I wouldn't recommend putting trees in.
Sure.
But unless you want to be a tree farmer.
Yeah. Okay. One of the next questions is, what are some of the best resources you can think of for a beginner? Books, local resources besides Stratford, websites, things like that. What are some things that come to your mind?
Well, Rodale is still incredible. I can't speak highly enough for them. They are folks too. I'm one that I continue to go back to, but I have such a backlog of stuff here, including file cabinets full of those. It's called ATTRA, ATTRA.org. It's Appropriate Technology Transfer for Rural Areas. They're located in Fayetteville, Arkansas, which is one of the places I farmed and lived for a while. and it's like extension service for regenerative or sustainable agriculture.
Okay.
And deep in wealth, and it's all free. It's like going to your county extension service. Now, I'm also a big advocate of the land grant system. They have some wonderful things that are available online, publications. There's information age in the computer. There's no shortage of information.
Sure.
But I like a good read. One of my favorite magazines right now is oh shoot, it's called Farming, and I can't remember the publisher's name now, but it's written here in Ohio. He's a friend of Gene Logson. Anybody ever read Gene Logson? He's an Amish farmer.
Okay.
Help me. All right, Farming Magazine. Look it up. You'll find who does it. But
yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Okay.
I know one of the books that I've read, you know, kind of understanding just like concepts behind like regenerative agriculture and like moving towards the future. A book I read last summer was The Third Plate. Again, I can't remember the author's name, but I'm sure if you search that up, it will be pretty easy to find. And so it talks about that shift from the first plate, which was, you know, early 1900s, we had half of our plate full of, you know, a chicken, the other half with like corn and then green beans, and then moving to our current plate, which is, you know, we're eating local, but it's still, you know, a full chicken breast or a full steak, you know, corn, but it's locally grown, and then like the green beans, and you pick that up at the farmer's market. And so it's the same, but it's a little bit different. And then he talks about moving towards the third plate and what that might look like in terms of, you know, health, nutrition, and it really then comes back to the consumer and what we're demanding, and that we have demanded, you know, the big cut and nice, pretty looking steak, the nice, pretty looking chicken breast, when instead we should be asking ourselves, you know, what's in season, what, you know, how can I still get my nutrition without, you know, these pretty looking things for my plate, and what that might look like, which is, I think, a good book to start with. Doesn't answer, you know, to get started farming, but I think it helps form answer questions you might have philosophically, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a wide open topic.
For sure.
Field, and then wide open with opportunities.
For sure.
Wide open. So I actually think we're entering a new era.
Yeah.
Of new farmers, young farmers, beginning farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And, this could be very important for the transformation of our society with a lot of the issues we're dealing with today.
Absolutely. I know the average current age of the farmer is, you know, reaching into the 70s.
Yeah.
And that is definitely going to be something to face soon in the future, and how we're going to be able to feed people. I think we found our
farmingmagazine.net.
Okay. Who is the chief editor? Doesn't say.
Farmingmagazine.net is a good resource.
I know that people are watching this. There we go. Jeff, you should remember that.
So
I want to say Yoda, but
okay. So we got about 10 minutes left. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to throw them in. I'm going to ask Jeff to talk about kind of his goals moving forward, whether that be for Stratford, and then also, you know, agriculture in general, kind of what he feels. So feel free to throw in some questions. If I see questions pop up, I'll stop them and we'll answer those. So,
okay.
So Jeff, what are your goals?
Well, my goals, I mean, obviously being on, is to continue to promote agricultural literacy more in a hands-on way. I personally like to eventually give up my tractor here at Stratford,
mm-hmm.
and just doing the farming and further developing the farm here. There's ideas and new, young, fresh minds and bodies that want to get into beginning farmers. So I don't like to think that I'm too old to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do as long as I can, but as I am not able to do as much as I can, I see myself teaching. So in terms of agriculture, literacy, and be part of the movement to see this wave that I'm experiencing of new interest in farming
Mm-hmm.
move forward.
Yeah.
For the farm, one of the biggest pieces on this farm, we got 236 acres total.
Okay.
I farm 65. We got 95 in the state nature preserve.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have 65 acre to play with.
Yeah.
Because the preserve is a hands-off
Right.
area. So agroforestry has always been high on my list.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I worked a 1,500 acre farm in Arkansas for 8 years, and,
Mm-hmm.
planted thousands of trees, mostly walnuts, lots of different types of walnuts. And, so we have a hillside full of invasives. And I would love to offer a school in agroforestry where every student gets an acre. They remove the invasives and learn how and why.
Mm-hmm.
Inventory what's left, which will be very little. Evaluate the soils, the slope, and the adaptiveness of the species to those soils and slopes within a context of creating enterprise diversity, which enhances biodiversity, redesign, and actually they're culminating, their graduation is the planting, the replanting of that hillside.
Yeah.
For future generations to appreciate.
Sure. So if you guys are tuning in and you're interested in that, definitely look out for that in the future. We don't have any questions yet, so
Okay.
if there's anything else you want to talk about, feel free.
Well, I mean, you've gotten into agriculture.
Yeah.
In a way that sort of puts you thinking about how we should move forward.
Sure.
As a junior at Ohio State University,
Mm-hmm.
what do you see are the sort of tenets that you wish land grants in general, not just Ohio State University, would offer
Sure.
and teach aspiring farmers or people who want to be in agriculture?
Right. So like I mentioned earlier, like I'm in agricultural education specifically, which means that I get to learn about a wide variety of topics. And so I take the intro courses for, pretty much anything Ohio State offers. But along with that, I also have a minor in production agriculture and then also environmental science. So I'm able to learn about a lot of different things, which I'm thankful for. But I think, and I know even Ohio State is working towards this, which is, connecting students to agriculture. So we're really lucky to have Waterman Farm at Ohio State, which is just, not too far from actually where we are on campus. And hopefully connecting students that are even from the College of Arts and Sciences that aren't even connected to the CFAES, which is the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences. And so connect to agriculture itself. And I know, like I said, I grew up on a farm. I've always been connected to agriculture. And initially, early in high school, I thought that I wanted to go into research, actually in entomology, as a beekeeper myself. But I felt that the world needed educators more than researchers. They're, do a lot of research, but if people don't know about agriculture and don't understand it and see the need to understand it, there aren't. And so that's why I went into education itself. I feel like there is a need just for people to understand agriculture as consumers. And so really, people that are tuning in that aren't, hoping to become farmers, I think that that's awesome that they're educating themselves. I definitely see that as being one of the biggest challenges and biggest needs to be met in agriculture is the consumer, because that's where the demand is driven from. So,
Right.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Right.
I mean, the utopian idea that we should all be involved in growing our own food.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
But I just don't see that happening.
For sure.
But I would like to see more people involved. And
Yeah.
actually, I would like to see consumers drive to do about what they want and demand in life. So it is like if the consumer came back and says, well, we would like to see more farmland and less housing.
Right.
I think that would be driven.
Yeah.
Or we want to see more local. I mean, the urban farm is a very amazing thing to me.
Yeah.
I've seen people grow year round,
Mm-hmm.
like mushrooms in the attic or
Right.
basement,
Yeah.
and the hemp in the attic.
Yeah.
And vegetables in their raised beds in their front yards.
Yeah.
Where they had to get a variance from the neighborhood to say, can I grow vegetables in my front yard instead of a lawn?
Yeah.
You know, it's exciting times that way, I think, for us because, especially with the context of the most recent COVID
right.
experience, which we're all going through still. It's like all of a sudden we all feel more vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and like we need to be more involved.
Right.
And how we maintain our own lives.
Yeah.
And it's, if I could teach anything to a young starting farmer, is to not be afraid of it. That you will take your hits, but you learn from those hits and you learn how to react to it. And again, it's sort of reconnecting you to your intuitive side.
Mm-hmm.
That it's yearning in there somewhere, buried underneath. You just got to sort of pull that back out.
Absolutely.
So I love agriculture and I love my career in it because it's given me an opportunity to approach and think about life in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And as an environmental enthusiast and a natural nature enthusiast, you get to talk about air, water, biodiversity,
mm-hmm.
and the environment, and our interactions with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant daily reminder. So, as we series,
right.
I'm hoping we can actually create new enthusiasm,
yeah,
and new passions for learning more.
Yeah.
And I'm almost 67 years old, and there's not a day goes by I don't learn something new that somehow doesn't excite me, and it's an exciting time.
Absolutely, I agree. I thought of more things to say about what we feel like we need to learn, and I feel like balance is what people are looking for. I feel like so much of our lives, besides agriculture, is just like is balance. And so, we look at politics and there's two sides and everything has two sides when really things could be able to meet in the middle, and that there is a balance that exists for growing food and, really using nature as our model, because nature has shown us that it is able to balance itself. And so we need to, learn how to rebalance ourselves as well. And I think that comes along with where we're headed. So we have about a minute left. We had one final question. Jared wants to know, what is your favorite crop to grow? So you can answer that, and then we'll end it there.
Wow, my favorite crop. I tell you what, the crop that's given me more joy consistently because it's easy to grow and its beauty and what it leaves me and allows me to do is spelt's high up there. I love it as a grain too. I wish spelt was used more as a flour, a substitute for wheat flour.
Yeah.
I wish it was more readily available. It's very gratifying to see a green ground emerge in October and stays green the entire winter, and it's there waiting for you to continue to see all that beautiful clover and timothy underneath when you harvest it. So it's a wonderful crop.
I agree. It's definitely really pretty. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Next week, we will do Introduction to Beekeeping. So look forward to that. That one will definitely be pretty interesting with our beekeeper here at Stratford, and then also some of my knowledge as being a beekeeper in the past. So thank you again for tuning in.